Hey everyone, welcome back. We're doing a deep dive today into something pretty fascinating.
Yeah,
It's a conversation where like personal experience and universal truth kind of like bump up against each other.
right.
Buckle up because we're going to be talking about things like energy healing and intuition.
Mm,
We might even like touch on quantum physics a little bit.
very cool.
So the source material you gave us for this deep dive
Yes.
is an AI analysis of a conversation from
Okay.
the YouTube channel, Being Reasonable.
Right.
And it features this Reiki practitioner named Sophie Dangtran.
Okay.
Now, we've also got this thing called the SE checklist,
Okay.
which the AI used to like break down the conversation.
Interesting. So we're going to be looking at not just what they said,
Yeah,
but like how they talk to each other.
exactly. So
Yeah.
that's kind of our mission for today.
Right.
We want to unpack this conversation between Sophie and the show's host, Mark Solomon,
Okay.
pull out the most interesting parts,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully leave you with something to think about.
Sounds good.
You ready to jump in?
Absolutely. Let's start with like what Reiki actually is.
Yeah, because that's like central to the whole conversation.
Definitely.
Okay, so Sophie describes Reiki as working with this thing she calls universal life force energy.
Okay.
And the word Reiki itself actually translates to that.
Really?
Yeah, Rei means universal, and Ki means life force energy.
Huh. So it's like built right into the name.
Yeah, and it's a practice that can be done like hands-on or
Mhm.
even hands-off.
Interesting.
And the goal is to like bring balance to this energy field
Right.
that Sophie believes surrounds all of us.
Okay, now here's where it gets interesting.
What's that?
Sophie's background is actually in computer programming.
Really?
Yeah. She describes herself as someone who used to be very logic-driven,
Uh-huh.
not really into all this like energy stuff.
Interesting.
But then she had this personal loss. Her cat died,
Ah,
and that like totally shifted her thinking.
wow. So she went from like hard data and logic
Yeah.
to like feelings and intuition.
It seems that way, and I think that's important because it might explain why she relies so heavily on personal experience
Okay.
as evidence that Reiki works.
So instead of scientific measurements, she's like,
Yeah.
I can feel it in my gut.
Exactly. She even says that.
Oh.
And that's something the AI analysis picks up on.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the AI points out that Sophie's belief seems to be unfalsifiable.
Unfalsifiable? What does that even mean?
Basically, it means there's no way to disprove it.
Oh,
Like, if Reiki seems to work, it's proof that it's effective.
okay.
But if it doesn't work,
Yeah.
it can be attributed to the person, like, subconsciously blocking its benefits.
So no matter what happens, it always fits into her belief system.
Exactly. And that makes having a productive discussion about it in the way that most people understand as productive
Mm-hmm.
really difficult.
Right, because you can't really argue with that.
Yeah. And Mark, the host, tries to challenge this a little bit.
Okay, how does he do that?
He brings up the idea of, like, magic hands.
Magic hand.
Yeah, he's essentially asking, how do we know this isn't just the placebo effect?
Oh, I see.
How can we tell the difference between Reiki and someone just like waving their hands and saying it's magic?
Right, like how do you separate the two?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you can almost hear Sophie like struggling with it.
So what does she say?
She seems to imply that they might actually operate in a similar way.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Right.
Like magic and Reiki are kind of the same thing.
Well, she doesn't quite say that outright, but she definitely hints at it.
Okay, so where do they go from there?
This leads them into a debate about universal truths versus subjective truths,
Ooh.
which becomes like a key theme in their conversation.
Okay, so this is where we see the danger of mistaking personal beliefs for universal truths.
Right, especially in today's world,
Mm-hmm.
where like different viewpoints can lead to so much conflict.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So how does this play out in their conversation?
They use this example of chickens.
Yeah, chickens.
Yeah, Mark asks Sophie, is there a universal truth
Oh.
about whether there's an even or odd number of chickens in the world at any given moment?
Huh, that's a weird question.
It is, but it gets to the heart of the matter.
Okay, so what does Sophie say?
At first, she agrees that there would have to be like a definitive answer, but then she brings in quantum physics.
Quantum physics, what does that have to do with chickens?
Well, she specifically mentions Schrodinger's cat.
Oh, wait, Schrodinger's cat, the one that's like both alive and dead
Yeah.
until you open the box. How does that relate to chickens?
Okay, so she's basically applying this concept of superposition,
Superposition.
which is the idea that in quantum physics, something can exist in multiple states at the same time.
Okay.
And she's applying that to her belief in personal truths.
So for her, the number of chickens could be both even and odd.
Yeah, depending on who's perceiving it.
Wow, so it's all relative.
That seems to be her point.
But isn't that kind of dangerous?
Yeah, the AI analysis points that out.
Really?
It says that confusing subjective opinions with objective truth can be a real problem.
Right, especially when it comes to things like politics.
Exactly. They actually used differing views on the last election as an example.
Oh, wow. So this is getting really relevant for our listeners.
Yeah, because we're all trying to navigate this world where different truths are constantly competing for our attention.
So it's like, how do we even know what to believe anymore?
Right. And that's where critical thinking comes in.
Yeah. Being aware of our own biases,
Mhm.
questioning our sources of information.
Absolutely. It's more important than ever to be discerning.
And maybe even more importantly, how do we talk to people
Yes.
who have totally different viewpoints?
That's the big question.
Especially when those viewpoints clash with our own sense of reality.
Exactly. But before we dive into those strategies,
Okay.
let's explore another key aspect of this conversation,
What's that?
the role of intuition and how Sophie uses it as a way of knowing.
All right, let's do it. Okay, so we've got Sophie, who's like all about intuition and feelings. And then we have Mark, who's coming at it from a more like logical, evidence-based perspective.
Exactly. And that difference is really fascinating.
Yeah, it shows you like how different people arrive at their beliefs.
And this is where that second source you provided comes in.
You mean the SEA checklist?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so remind me again, what's that all about?
Well, it's called Street Epistemology.
Street epistemology?
Yeah.
Does that mean like Mark takes Sophie out on a street corner and like starts grilling her about Reiki?
No, it's not about the setting.
Okay.
It's more like a conversational approach.
Okay.
It encourages people to think critically about how they form their beliefs.
I see. So it's not about changing someone's mind,
Right.
but more about helping them examine their own thought process.
Exactly. And the AI used this checklist to assess how well Mark did that in his conversation with Sophie.
Okay. I'm curious, what did the AI think?
Well, it said that Mark did a pretty good job of diving into Sophie's epistemology.
Her what now?
Epistemology, it basically means like how she knows what she knows.
Oh, okay.
He asked those probing questions
Yeah.
about like how she could be so sure about Reiki.
And did he like try to convince her she's wrong?
No, the AI noted that he kept things civil and respectful.
Okay, good, because that's important.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like there were some things Mark did well,
Yes.
but were there also some areas where he could have improved?
Yeah, the AI pointed out a couple of things.
I quit.
Well, first it said that Mark could have gone deeper into Sophie's personal experiences with Reiki.
Oh, so like not just talking about it in general terms.
Right, but getting into those specific moments.
Okay.
That made her believe in it so strongly.
Yeah, like those aha moments.
Exactly, because those often reveal a lot about how someone forms their beliefs.
That makes sense.
And the AI also suggested that Mark could have done more to build rapport with Sophie.
So it's not just about the logic and arguments,
No.
but also about creating like a connection.
Yeah, building trust before diving into those deep beliefs.
It's like that saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Exactly. You've got to connect on a human level first.
And how do you do that?
Sometimes the best approach is just asking good questions,
Okay.
the kind that encourage self-reflection and get the person to really think about their own thought process.
Which is where the AI's suggestion of using a confidence scale comes in, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So instead of just asking Sophie, do you believe in Reiki? You ask her, like, how confident are you?
Right, like on a scale of 1 to 10.
Oh, I see.
That way you can gauge the strength of her conviction.
And maybe find areas where she's more open to other possibilities.
Exactly. And even if her confidence stayed high,
Yeah.
just going through that process can be valuable.
Okay, how so?
It forces her to articulate her reasoning,
Right.
to think about potential counter-arguments.
And that can help her clarify her thinking.
Yeah, and maybe even realize where she might need more information.
Or a different perspective.
Abs-
But it's important to remember that street epistemology isn't about winning an argument.
Definitely not.
It's more about encouraging critical thinking, self-reflection,
Right.
and ultimately becoming more comfortable with uncertainty.
Because in today's world, we're bombarded with information from all sides.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
So being able to think critically and evaluate evidence is
Right.
crucial.
Absolutely.
Now, this conversation with Mark and Sophie is a great case study,
Yeah.
but these principles have broader applications.
Oh, really? Like what?
Think about conversations you've had about politics or religion, health relationships, anytime there's room for thoughtful dialogue.
So for our listeners who are like, Okay, this is all interesting, but how do I actually use this in my life?
Well, the first step is to turn that critical thinking inward.
Okay, what do you mean?
Pay attention to your own thought processes.
Okay.
How do you arrive at your beliefs?
Hmm.
What kind of evidence do you rely on?
Yeah.
And how open are you to considering other viewpoints?
Especially ones that challenge my own.
Exactly. Self-awareness is key.
Got it.
You got to understand your own biases
Right.
before you can engage with others effectively.
Okay, so what about when I'm actually talking to someone and we disagree?
Try to approach it with curiosity
Okay.
instead of judgment.
So, like, really listen to them.
Yes.
Ask questions, try to understand their perspective.
Even if you don't agree with it.
It's about creating a space for open and honest dialogue.
Exactly where people feel safe to share their views.
Without being attacked or ridiculed.
And here's a big one. Don't be afraid to admit when you don't know something.
Really?
Yeah, acknowledging uncertainty can actually be a strength.
Huh, how so?
It shows humility
Okay.
and a willingness to learn.
Because sometimes being too certain can be a roadblock.
Right, like we saw with Sophie.
It can prevent you from seeing other possibilities.
Exactly, and this brings us to a really tough question.
What's that?
If everyone has their own personal truth,
Mhm.
how do we navigate disagreements and make decisions as a society?
Wow. Yeah, that's a big one.
Especially when we value consensus and shared understanding.
It's like we're living in a world of parallel realities.
Right.
Each person convinced of their own version of truth. So if objective truth is elusive, what foundation do we have for making decisions?
Or even for determining right from wrong.
Those are some deep questions.
Yeah, maybe we need a whole other deep dive to explore those.
Uh-huh, maybe so.
But for now, let's give our listeners a moment to digest everything we've covered.
Okay,
We'll be back soon to unpack those challenging questions
sounds good.
and uncover some final insights from this fascinating conversation.
Okay, so we're back.
Back again.
And I feel like there's this big question
Yeah.
hanging over everything.
What's that?
Like, how do we deal with a world where everybody seems to have their own version of truth?
Right. Especially when those truths like clash.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's a question that comes up direct in the conversation we've been looking at.
Oh, really? How so?
They talk about like differing views on the election and some people believing there was widespread voter fraud,
Right.
even though there's no evidence to support that.
Yeah, it's like we're living in parallel universes sometimes.
It really does.
You know, you scroll through social media,
Yeah,
everybody's convinced that their reality is the right one.
it's crazy.
So what's interesting to me is that neither Mark nor Sophie actually give us any easy answers.
Right.
Sophie seems to embrace this whole idea of personal truth,
Yeah.
while Mark is pushing for a more evidence-based approach.
But even he seems kind of stumped
Yeah.
by Sophie's like unwavering belief.
Yeah, it's like they're speaking two different languages,
I know.
each stuck in their own way of seeing the world.
So where does that leave us?
Yeah. Are we just doomed to disagree forever?
Well, I don't think so.
Okay, good.
I think this conversation actually gives us some tools.
Okay, what kind of tools?
One of the biggest is humility. Recognizing that we don't have all the answers,
Right.
that our understanding is always limited, that can open us up to learning from other people,
Even people we disagree with.
especially people we disagree with.
Okay, but what about when someone's truth is, like, harmful or based on misinformation?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Do we just ignore it?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
It's about finding a balance.
Okay.
Like we can respect someone's right to believe something without agreeing with them
Right.
or condoning harmful actions.
But we should still engage with them.
Yeah, in a way that acknowledges their humanity.
Even when we totally disagree with their ideas.
Exactly. It's about separating the person from the belief,
Okay.
challenging the idea without attacking the individual.
And how do we do that?
Well, I think this is where street epistemology can help.
Okay.
Asking those probing questions,
Yeah.
but not in an accusatory way.
Right.
Encourage them to think critically.
About their own beliefs.
Exactly.
But what if they're not open to that? What if their belief is, like, so strong
Yeah.
that nothing can change their mind?
That's when it gets really tricky.
Yeah.
There's no easy answer.
Okay.
Sometimes the best you can do is respectfully disagree and maybe focus on finding common ground.
In other areas.
Right, like maybe you share some values
Yeah.
or goals.
It's about choosing your battles.
Yeah, and recognizing that not every conversation is going to lead to a big change of heart.
And that's okay.
It is, because sometimes just having the conversation
Yeah.
is a win in itself.
How so?
It can plant seeds of doubt,
Okay.
open up new perspectives, maybe even lead to a better relationship down the road.
That's hopeful.
It is. And, all these little conversations,
Yeah.
these attempts to understand each other, maybe they can help create a less polarized world.
I like that idea.
Me too.
A world where it's not just us versus them.
Yeah, where we can see each other as human beings.
Even when we disagree.
Exactly.
Well, dear listeners,
Yes.
we've reached the end of our deep dive.
We have.
We've explored Reiki. We've wrestled with the idea of truth.
And we've talked about how hard it is
Yeah.
to navigate a world of so many different beliefs.
And even though we didn't find all the answers,
Yeah.
I hope this has sparked some new questions for you.
Me too. And maybe even a little more curiosity.
About the world.
The world and the people in it.
Because this whole quest for knowledge,
Yeah.
it never really ends.
It doesn't.
That's a gem,
A
though.
journey that requires an open mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a willingness to question everything.
Even our own assumptions.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay, hit us with it.
Does the existence or non-existence of universal truths actually impact how we approach disagreements
Interesting.
and make decisions in this world of so many different beliefs?
It's a great question.
Definitely something to ponder.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And until next time,
Yes.
keep those minds curious and those conversations flowing.